Namaste. So recently I posted a story of an Ayurvedic book. I was reading a book on Ayurvedic cooking. I am reading a book on Ayurvedic cooking. And I received several comments and inquiries about this subject of Ayurveda. And it inspired me to create an introductory video about the way that I see Ayurveda and how it is linked to yoga. With the disclaimer maybe to not wanting to fall into the trap of diluting a subject that is so complex and so enriched and so dense, because our postmodern culture tends to dilute everything that is complex, maybe with the intention of trying to make it digestible and simple for the Western mind, but also it loses so much in translation, especially when it's a science system so ancestral as Ayurveda is. And so Ayurveda is often referred as the sister of yoga, and in the Vedic systems they always grew together. I highly recommend looking at Martina Siska. She is incredible woman who has done a fascinating work on Ayurveda and how it's linked to the spiritual component of yoga. And the thing is that when yoga was developed, it was developed as consciousness. So in the Vedic system, we have two principles that are always coexisting, and they are called Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is the cosmic mind. That's how it translates. Is the invisible yet all-intelligent, pervasive understanding of reality. Whereas Prakriti is matter. So you have both mind and matter coming into this conception of the universe. And yoga focused on uniting with this consciousness. And Ayurveda was developed as a system to understand the natural world and the more scientific aspect of understanding the manifest reality. But they're always coexisting, and they're not separate, they're one. And so we have these beautiful sciences growing together. And yoga later on with Patanjali and the system of yoga as movement was developed later on, but in the beginning yoga was about uniting consciousness. This is because the yog comes from the root yug, and the etymology means to unite. So yoga was developed as this nisarga state of being, to abide in a state of consciousness that is in unison, united. And as the minds began to fragment more, and as cultures began to grow farther apart from the raison d'etre of why we're here, yoga was developed as a system to unite the limited self with the infinite self. And yoga is that science of uniting with the core of our being, uniting the limited mind, the manas, with the Purusha, with the cosmic mind. And it's what we experience in a deep meditation, this returning to wholeness. And Ayurveda was developed as the understanding of the material world, and it comes from the principle of panshamahabhutas, and this is the science of the 5 elements that comprise this reality, this material world, and this is based on the 5 elements that constitute the natural world, and therefore the human being as well. And sometimes we see ourselves as separate from the planet, which is silly, right? So these 5 elements are ether, air, water, fire, and earth. And it's really to the visible eye to see it in our natural surroundings, right? We have the water flowing in the bodies of water. We have the fire that takes place on the earth. We have the wind, and we have the ether as the conception of space, spaciousness. And there's a whole dialectics on the science of ether with Einstein, but won't get into this right now. But ether is spaciousness, and sometimes we forget of the importance of having this space. And so the same systems, the same elements apply to the human body. Perhaps it's a little bit more complex to see, but once we understand it, we can see ourselves as part of the natural world. So ether, again, is this spaciousness, and it's really important to understand the power of spaciousness. So we all have this ether inside of our bodies, whether it be those spaces in between the joints, or spaces in our digestive system, spaces in the ventricles of our hearts, space in most importantly, I think, in our minds. That space between a thought, that space of self-reflection, that capacity to go inward, is that spaciousness, that ether. So the more I go into the health care of our bodies in my studies, the more I understand that when there's no space, a sickness gets created, a disease. And it happens both in our minds and in our bodily system. So if there's a thought that never gets processed, if there's some kind of clogged in the machine that doesn't allow ourselves to think clearly, it will develop eventually into a sickness, into an illness, because it never got the space to be processed. The same with our bodies. If we eat in a particular way that clogs our arteries, we will develop a heart attack, or high blood pressure, or whatever, pressure, because we will not have given ourselves the space to process those Freudian slips that just happened to me. So spaciousness is really important and should never be overlooked. And then we have the wind system. So the winds is everything that moves, can be the passing thoughts as wind, but also the element of the wind as air that moves, say like if we are urinating or if we're menstruating, that apana, that movement that flows with our systems. The digestive tract also moves with winds. It's that which pushes, right? It's that flowingness. And then also the waters in our system. Of course, we are high percentage of water in our body, but also seeing it, the water as liquid, like our circulation or our digestive tract moving. That flow of the liquids. And also the fire is really important, as I see it both ways. In the digestive system, we need that fire to digest food in order to transform and get the nutrients out of it. But also we need the fire of the intellect, the fire of the mind, in order to digest ideas, in order to comprehend what's happening. It is the tapas, the fire, which digests information, both in our digestion, but also in our minds, in our hearts. Also the fire of creativity arises from that element. And then the earth is everything structural. So our bones, for instance, are the earth. So Ayurveda is the science that understands how these elements work in our systems and how to bring them into balance. Now, balance is a key word, because that's what dosha means. So you hear a lot, and this is what I was talking in the beginning of, the dilution of a system that's so complex, like 3 tips to understand your dosha. Which dosha are you? And not that this is incorrect, but it just takes out so much more richness from these systems that are sciences. So doshas is to come into balance. So it can also, it can be both the being in balance or the imbalances in our system. So these elements that we were speaking about come into they're attracted to one another, and they form groups of these elements. So for instance, ether and air are attracted to each other and they form a balance. Or water and fire are attracted to each other and they form a balance. Or earth and water are attracted to each other and they form a dosha. So we have 3 systems of doshas. So we have, when we have the ether and the air, we form a vata dosha. And when we have the water and the fire, it forms pitta dosha. And this is really interesting because wherever there is fire, to understand, fire melts, yeah? So there's also a liquidization in that alchemical process. And then we have the water with the earth, and that forms kapha dosha. So everyone has the systems inside of us. We all have each of these combinations inside of our systems, but each of us tends to slightly move towards one of them. So maybe it's a tendency to be dramatic and impulsive and always looking for that spice and a lot of fire in your system, yeah? Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's more of a lighter, softer kind of being, or maybe it's too ethereal. And we go also through them in different cycles of our life. But the important thing is to understand that all of them are inside of us and that we have the capacity to balance these doshas in order to live a very fulfilling and meaningful and embodied life. A very enriched connection to the natural world and to each other. So there are, depending on our lifestyle, we will enhance these doshas. And this is where I would like to go deeper, perhaps in other videos, to continue to contextualize, but also go deeper into the science of the Ayurvedic lifestyle. So if we need more fire in our lives, which foods should we be eating? Which exercises should we be performing? Should we perform? If we need more calmness and relaxation, which types of foods would be good for our composition in order to achieve that equanimity? And this gets into the gunas, which is shifting in greater qualities of our being. But I think I'll leave the gunas for another video because it's also complex. What I would like to know is if you have any particular questions that I can address in another video, or if you like this subject, I would love to know, because then I can go in that direction as well. And leave it here as an invitation for us to reflect on the different elements inside of our being. I think it's a gift and such a beautiful introspective work to see how these elements are moving inside of our body, and how can we integrate our human experience to live a more enriched life and a more connected life, and also to understand that when we see these things clearly, we can make choices in order to enhance that direction. It's like the reason why Jnana Yoga, the yoga of wisdom, is so special is because when we form maps of meaning, we have an understanding of what is at stake and where can we move towards. So with Ayurveda, we have this system that allows us to understand how the human composition works, and we can then enhance our experience and neutralize perhaps energies that are not so desired. So again, this is just an intro video. Martina Siska, I highly recommend you look her up if this is of interest to you. But also, please, I would love to know if this is interesting to you. Please let me know, and if you have any questions as well, because I would personally love to go into it with you. And then let's hope for more informative videos that focus on the nutritional aspect of it. And again, always to think nutrition not only in the foods we eat, but also in our daily life. So I hope this is of service. I send you all my blessings and have a beautiful day. Namaste.